I
Good. I guess it's afternoon now, everyone. Good afternoon. I appreciate you all waiting for us. It's great to be back with Senator Akshar. I'm actually going to. I know what I'm going to do this in reverse. I know that folks around the community have been dealing with significant flooding issues, and let me tell you, I recognize as a county executive and a former village mayor, the responsibility of government is to be there during the most difficult times. And I know that there are plenty of individuals who are still waiting for the state's assistance. Let me offer to you that in responding to emergencies, it is absolutely critical that politicians sort of stand to the side and allow the emergency responders to focus their response effectively. And most importantly, those of us who do have elected office should make sure that our response is integrated and sustained, and that we're there until the end. And I just would offer to you, if given the opportunity to be governor, I will apply the same standard I have for the last 25 years, which is to make government effectively work, not for a press conference, not for a ribbon cutting, not for a photo op, but for the people it's supposed to serve. And to those who are still struggling today, I can only tell you this. If I'm governor, help will always be on the way. And we will never put a photo op ahead of doing the right thing. I mean that sincerely. I've lived it every day, and I know how important and valuable it is. But as a citizen and as a New Yorker, I extend certainly my very best and hopes for a speedy recovery and assistance to all those who are still struggling. We're here today to continue to talk a little bit about where I am in my campaign, but also what's been going on in New York. I don't think it comes as a surprise to anybody that after 7 years of Andrew Cuomo, New York is the highest taxed state in America. We shoulder the highest burden of property taxation, the highest cost of living. We remain among the least friendly places to have a business, the least friendly place to retire, the least freedom to live as we hope. And at the same time, this governor continues to ignore the continued corruption that's infected his administration. Even to the extreme of ignoring the fact that 6 or 7 individuals associated with his administration have been found guilty of federal corruption charges. A jury of their peers, acknowledging that this governor has allowed his very office to be bid out to the highest bidder. The system has been rigged and rules bent to benefit those on the inside, and ordinary New Yorkers are too often standing on the outside looking in. It was a little over it was only some years ago that the governor, when asked about his governing, said to the media that he was the government. He said, "I am the government." Now, if that wasn't bad enough, we heard what the governor really thinks these days only a week ago. In order to win a Democratic primary, he stood in front of an audience and said, "America was never that great." America was never that great, he said. He thinks that that's what's necessary in order to win progressive voters in a Democratic primary, to discard all this country has done for countless generations of Americans and citizens the world over. And the only thing that I asked, and I think the only thing that New Yorkers and Americans should expect, is an honest, earnest apology. Just say, "I'm sorry." But the governor doesn't seem to understand that, because he can't acknowledge fault. And his inability to acknowledge fault has led us to having a state government that is corrupted. He leads the most corrupted state government in America. Not being able to admit fault is why too often problems that face ordinary New Yorkers don't get solved. It's why taxes are so high. It's why the trains don't run on time in New York City. It's why there are people who are struggling every day to find a job. It's why dairy farmers like the ones we met with this morning continue to worry and wonder how they are going to remain open. And it's why average New Yorkers, regardless of party, begin to wonder if they can trust or believe in anything that government has to say or do. He's broken that bond of trust between New Yorkers and his office. Well, I think it's about time that we restore that trust, that we take back our government, and that we give New Yorkers something to believe in again. A state government that respects the people, respects the history of our nation, respects the fact that we are not perfect. We are not perfect as a nation. We have our flaws. But what makes and has made America great is our relentless and determined march to be better, to get things right, to encourage individuals to achieve great success. So when the governor said what he said, I not only was shocked, but I was ashamed. You're looking at a boy, I like to think so, a 42-year-old man, who for a number of years was raised by a single mom, and food stamps put food on our table. My mom worked hard, and she encouraged us to work hard. She demanded that we respect others and we respect ourselves, and that we take every opportunity with gratitude and we use it to improve ourselves. And now her son is the candidate for governor in the greatest state, in the greatest nation in America. I'm surprised my governor doesn't understand that. There are countless people who struggle all across our society, but they understand that the promise and potential of America makes it possible for us to achieve even more. There are those who struggle in inner cities, in violence, those who live with disabilities, who too often feel marginalized, but they recognize that we live in a place that if they speak up and stand up, if they march together, that they can affect profound change. And that when we make change in this nation, when we make change, the rest of the world listens. I wish my governor understood that. Instead, he chose to dismiss and disregard all of that in order to score a political point. I'm running for governor of the state of New York because it is time we take our state government back. It is time that we make it more affordable. It is time that somebody finally says, as an ordinary New Yorker, that every vote matters, every person counts, and every life has value. That as a state, we cannot afford to continue to dismiss or disregard those with whom we disagree, as the governor does too often, but rather pull each other up together and start to solve the major problems that face us, because we are great, because we have always been great, and because this state and this nation will always strive to be greater. That's why I'm running for governor. That's why we're crisscrossing the state, and that's why I'm proud to stand with ordinary New Yorkers to hold this governor accountable and say, quite simply, Governor, just apologize. Just apologize and acknowledge that we are better. We are better than that. So with that, I know there's some media members of the press here. I know that Senator Akshar is here. I'm sure that both of us would be happy to answer a few questions if you have them. And I'm just thrilled to be back.
Mr. Molinaro.
It's Mark. Go ahead. It's always Mark.
All right. Mark, we've heard many statements from the governor over the years in reference to making New York the progressive capital of the nation. We've heard him make statements about having certain members of New York State leave. And most importantly, also recently making statements about making New York a sanctuary state. Can you address, what are your thoughts about that? How would you address this, this concern?
Well, first I want to start where you started, which is, Andrew Cuomo's father had something to say about shoving ideology down the throats of the people you serve. He suggested that you should be awfully careful about forcing your ideology onto other people, because sooner or later they'll force their ideology onto you. I think New Yorkers of all party and political and ideological backgrounds deserve a governor that respects them. It was only 4 years ago that this governor looked out and said to those who were right of center that they had no place in New York. So let me tell you my philosophy. If you are too far left of center, you have every place in New York. And if you are center, you have every place in New York. And if you are right of center, you have every place in New York. We have got to stop creating these false lines in the sand and expect individuals to pick a side. We will never cut taxes, make New York safer, improve our quality of life, make us more affordable by asking ordinary people to choose a side. This governor ought to stop making people choose which side of the fence they're on, and instead, I choose to bring people together. I support the concept that everyone who lives honorably and follows the law in the state of New York ought to be protected. I don't think we create special sanctions, if you will, where we get to ignore certain laws. But everybody should enjoy the ability to live safely in a state. And that's why I think that a governor with some of the most heated issues on immigration, on law enforcement, on public safety, we can't afford to say if you're either with us or against us. We have to find a way to bring people together, and I will convene the best and the brightest, regardless of party, regardless of ideology, to solve the problems that face New York. That's what I think people deserve, and that's what I think in 2018 we finally need, because we cannot afford to govern by simply saying, agree with me or get out, as the governor did 4 years ago. Yes, sir. I'll get back to you, I promise.
So this is the second time you've been to the Southern Tier in the last.
Well, this is more
Well, I
than
mean,
the second time.
within the last few weeks.
Yes, yeah,
But
fair enough.
from those trips you've been making, what are sort of the common issues you've been hearing from the people of the Southern Tier specifically?
Yeah. Number one, I believe that many throughout the Southern Tier believe this governor has ignored them, ignored their concerns, ignored their plight, ignored their challenges. And number one, property taxes and the high burden of property taxation is on everybody's lips. The lack of job opportunities and the failure of the governor to acknowledge that there is real need to make real investment in our communities to grow jobs. The challenges facing farmers every day, and a governor who seems to think the response to that is to offer dairy farmers a suicide hotline instead of trying to drive down cost and regulation to make it easier. And by the way, negotiate with the power of the state of New York new opportunities to sell our products, and use every resource available to the governor of the state of New York to advocate for new opportunities to lower the cost and create new opportunities for the sale of New York products. And dairy farmers and farmers across the Southern Tier understand that. So we continue here. It's taxes, it's jobs, and it's creating a government that respects the people that live here. I hear it all the time. Did I cover that pretty well?
That's great.
Yes, sir.
Mark,
Thank
as
you.
a follow-up to your statement, you mentioned laws, and that's very important. Governor Cuomo in 2012 and 2013 created the SAFE Act.
Yeah.
Very quietly and without a lot of public knowledge. Now we see that he's working on another very concerning law, which would be the red flag laws. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but again, it's a bill that's being very quietly pushed through. For those who are concerned about the Second Amendment and pro-gun advocates, can you tell us where's your stance on these laws and what you may do?
I have always been and remain a strong defender of the Second Amendment, period. We have a Constitution. It has a proclaimed Bill of Rights. Those Bill of Rights provide individual freedoms that ought to be protected. What the governor wants you to believe is that by checking a box, he's going to make New York safer. New York is not safer because we check boxes. It's safer because we invest in our people. And what he's allowed to occur all across the state of New York, in our cities, and even in our schools, are kids who live with traumatic issues, who live with significant mental health concerns, that there are those who believe that violence is the only way to act out. They continue to not have the support and the assistance they need. As governor, I want to restore and protect the rights of law-abiding citizens. Those who have violent criminal behavior should not have access to a firearm, and we ought to be investing in trying to prevent incidents from occurring. We have a problem as a society, and it's understandable. We tend to focus on the last day, and we ought to. When lives are taken, when violence occurs, we ought to be deeply, deeply concerned, and we ought to take action. But we don't do enough to focus on the first day. What caused that young person to have what trauma occurred in their life that they believe acting out against themselves or others in a violent manner is the appropriate thing to do? What mental health issue has been going on in that family unit, in that child or individual's life that could have been addressed to prevent a crime? I will spend every day of my administration trying to focus on the root causes of violence, because we cannot merely legislate safety. We have to build strong families. We have to ensure that those who wish to celebrate their faith have a strong faith network, that kids living in violent situations or don't have support of their families have a government that protects them, that those who have experienced trauma have mental health professionals and school resource officers and others in their lives to be able to provide them the assistance they need. That's the focus that will allow us to create an environment where violence isn't the way people act out. I have deep concern. I have kids of my own. Deep concern about their safety. I also have deep concern about their friends and what is going on in their lives that we as a society ought to be spending some time focused on, strengthening them so they don't act out in violent ways. That's how we get to the root causes, and that, I think, is how we make New York safe. One more if you want. I don't mind. I'm here. We're all here.
About a month and a half ago, State Controller Tom Binghamton had mentioned that the New York State is looking at about $18 billion in debt within the next 3 years. This is a serious economic problem, especially for areas like the Binghamton, Southern Tier, and Central New York areas, which are in severe economic circumstances. What do you propose that may be able to address this upcoming debt caused by the last 8 years with the government?
I hate to say this, but I've become almost an expert in turning around governments with difficult financial conditions. I inherited a $40 million budget gap when I became county executive in Dutchess, and over the course of my tenure, we've turned it around into a $20 million surplus in 4 years of property tax relief. I just offer to you that I look forward to the challenge, but let me at least offer context. Tom DiNapoli's assessment is correct. This governor is steering the state of New York to a nearly $18 billion deficit. That is not competence. That is not effective government. That's not responsible stewardship of taxpayers' resources. He spends more than New York has, and he taxes more than New Yorkers can afford, and then blames people at the local level for not getting their act together. Well, the truth is that after 8 years, we have an incompetent state government, and I can rattle off the issues, but I won't, only to say this. I start from demanding that government justify its expenses. See, the governor often wants to talk only about the revenue end of things. We've got to look at how and where we spend dollars. I believe in zero-based budgeting, asking every agency, department, and policymaker to look at every dollar you spend, and if you can't justify why we're spending it, if you can't explain if we're getting the outcome, if you can't prove that we're getting what we're paying for, then we're not paying for it. And by doing that, you start to hold government accountable. And by the way, I believe that's compassionate. My daughter was born with a developmental disability. We benefit from Medicaid services. She receives a Medicaid through the Medicaid waiver. We waste more money in that system that steals from people who need it, vulnerable citizens, those living with disabilities, those who are poor. It steals from them because we waste. Albany and this governor has allowed fraud and abuse and constant expenditures without taking on really making government efficient. So I say you modernize government, you hold it accountable, you restrain its spending capacity, and you make it compassionate in the delivery of service. And by doing that, you can rein in the cost, address the deficit, and lower taxes. And my commitment is this: we will modernize the state government. We will make it efficient in the delivery of core services. We will help those who need help. And at the same time, every dollar we save will go to property tax relief and retiring debt. New Yorkers shoulder too much debt, and our property taxes are too high, and we have to focus on driving down property taxes and righting the fiscal condition of the state of New York. Okay? You're good? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Senator Akshar, we're here at the press conference for Marc Molinaro, who's running for governor. He's just finished speaking, and what were some of your thoughts?
Well, look, you heard many of the reasons today from Marc why Team Akshar is behind him 110%. Here you have an ordinary New Yorker who has just lived a very ordinary life, someone who is steeped in public service, and quite frankly, who just wants to make New York more affordable for everyone. For far too long, bureaucrats in Albany have essentially forgotten about those on Main Street, New York. And as I educate myself more and more about Marc and listen to him, his platform, and the things that he wants to do, it's very clear to me that he cares about everyday New Yorkers. And someone like Marc and under his administration, I have all the confidence in the world that he would put people before politics every day of his administration. So again, I'm encouraging everyone to learn more about Marc. Follow him, Molinaro4ny.com, to learn more about his platform, his position on issues. And I firmly believe that help is in fact on the way, as he spoke about today. I believe he has exactly what it's going to take to right a sinking ship. And, we live in the southern tier, but for far too long, I think we feel like we are the forgotten tier. And, the fact that Marc, again, is just an ordinary New Yorker who cares about everyday New Yorkers, I know under his administration we'll get the help that we so desperately need.
I know on Monday you had been with his lieutenant governor candidate, Julie Killian, and are you also going to be at the town hall event tonight in Binghamton at the Holiday Inn at 6 p.m., supporting there as well?
Yeah, look, make no mistake about it. I am fully engaged, and I am supporting Marc Molinaro and his candidacy 110%. I'm doing my part as I travel throughout my district to ensure that my constituents, the people that I so proudly represent, have an opportunity to meet Marc and to hear his position on a plethora of issues. Because, again, I feel very confident about saying this, that Marc has what it takes to right a sinking ship. And I want to do my part in ensuring that the constituents that I represent have an opportunity to listen to him.